Welcome back to Mind Matters, where we explore the fascinating landscape of human psychology and behavior, untangling some of life's most complex questions with a calm and evidence-informed approach. Today, we're diving into a concept that's become almost legendary in popular culture, often dramatized in our favorite true crime shows and thrillers, the cooling-off period in criminal profiling. You've probably heard the term, that eerie silence between a serial killer's horrific acts, a time when they supposedly return to normal life before striking again. But what exactly is this cooling-off period, and how much of what we think we know is myth versus reality? My goal today isn't to sensationalize, but to peel back the layers, understand the origins of this idea, explore its practical implications for law enforcement, and acknowledge where the science currently stands. It's a concept central to understanding certain types of violent crime, yet it's also steeped in ambiguity and debate. Let's unpack it together, separating the dramatic narrative from the nuanced truth. At its core, a cooling-off period refers to the interval of time between separate murder events committed by a serial killer. Imagine it as a psychological intermission. After the intense emotional arousal of a homicide, the offender is thought to retreat, to essentially hit an emotional reset button. They might return to their everyday routine, go to work, interact with family, live what appears to be a perfectly normal life. During this period, they're processing the previous crime, perhaps reliving it in their minds, and subtly or not so subtly, beginning to prepare for the next. It's this distinct break, this return to normalcy, that has historically been considered a crucial differentiator in how we categorize multiple victim homicides. You see, not all multiple murders are the same. This concept helps us distinguish between three main types. First, we have serial killers, who commit multiple murders in separate events, crucially with that cooling-off period in between. Then there are spree killers, who commit 2 or more murders in more than one location, within a short time frame before any real emotional cooling-off period can happen. It's a continuous, rapid escalation. And finally, mass murderers, who kill multiple victims in a single event, often in one location. Think of a tragic school shooting or a workplace rampage. This idea didn't just appear out of nowhere. It really gained prominence through the pioneering work of the FBI, particularly its behavioral science unit. Visionaries like John E. Douglas and Robert Ressler, often credited with coining the term serial homicide itself in the 1970s, were instrumental in developing profiling methodologies that inherently recognize these periods of latency. Even earlier, the application of psychological principles was demonstrated by Dr. James Brussel, who famously profiled the Mad Bomber of New York City in the 1950s, long before modern profiling was formally established.
Psychologically, several theories attempt to explain these cooling-off periods. One common idea is a temporary satiation of urges. After the intense experience of a homicide, the desire is temporarily fulfilled. It's almost like an addiction cycle, where the intense high is followed by a period of calm or withdrawal before the craving builds again. Offenders might also be processing the crime, managing their fear of detection, or channeling their violent fantasies into other, less destructive outlets during this time. For instance, the infamous BTK killer, Dennis Rader, meticulously planned his attacks, with significant breaks between them, often years apart, living a seemingly normal life as a husband, father, and active community member in between. He truly embodied the concept of distinct cooling-off periods. But now, let's pivot from the foundational understanding to what often happens when a concept moves from academic discussion into the broader public consciousness and practical application. This is where the myth versus reality dynamic truly comes into play. Popular culture, in its quest for compelling narratives, has often portrayed criminal profiling, and by extension cooling-off periods, with an almost infallible accuracy and certainty. Shows like Criminal Minds or Mindhunter are captivating, but they can inadvertently create a perception that profiling is a precise science, a magic bullet for solving crimes. The reality, as is often the case, is far more complex and fraught with challenges. One of the most significant controversies surrounding the cooling-off period is its definitional ambiguity. How long exactly is a cooling-off period? Is it a day, a week, a year? The truth is, there's no precise, universally accepted definition. Its subjective nature means the duration can vary wildly from one offender to another, from days to years. This inconsistency makes it incredibly challenging to apply a rigid definition in investigations or to categorize offenders neatly. This very challenge led to a significant shift within the FBI. In 2005, they actually removed the spree killer category, largely due to these arbitrary guidelines associated with defining a cooling-off period. They recognized that trying to draw a clear line in the sand between a spree and a serial killer based on an inherently subjective time frame was simply not practically beneficial for investigations. This highlights a crucial point. Real-world criminal behavior rarely fits into neat academic boxes. Beyond definitional issues, criminal profiling itself, including the concept of cooling-off periods, has faced considerable criticism for what some perceive as a lack of scientific rigor and empirical testing. Critics argue that profiles can often rely too heavily on intuition and experience rather than robust, verifiable evidence. When experts interpret a cooling-off period, how do we ensure different profilers would come to the same conclusion? This issue of inter-rater agreement is a real concern in psychological assessment. The concern is that profiles can sometimes be too general, potentially fitting many individuals, or that research hasn't adequately covered the extreme complexities of these very low-frequency crimes. This blurring of lines also extends to the very killer typologies we discussed earlier. Cases often challenge the strict categories of serial, spree, and mass murderers. Some offenders exhibit behaviors that could be considered hybrid, like a spree serial killer. For instance, Randall Woodfield, the I-5 killer, rapidly escalated his crimes across multiple states, blurring the lines of what a typical cooling-off period might entail. These cases underscore the difficulty in applying rigid definitions, including the cooling-off period, to the messy reality of human behavior.
So, what does all this mean for our understanding, and where do we go from here? It means that while the concept of a cooling-off period remains a valuable tool for understanding the psychological patterns of some serial offenders, it's not the definitive, easily quantifiable marker we might assume from television. It's a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. The future of criminal profiling and our understanding of concepts like cooling-off periods will undoubtedly involve a continued push for greater scientific validity and empirical rigor. Researchers and law enforcement agencies are constantly striving to move beyond intuition, developing more robust methodologies and relying on data-driven insights. This means refining definitions, standardizing how we measure and interpret these periods, and seeking greater consensus among experts. There's also an intriguing avenue for exploring new theoretical concepts, such as the speculative biological hypothesis that likens cooling-off periods to neuronal refractory periods, essentially a biological system needing a reset before it can fire again. While still highly speculative, these ideas open new avenues for understanding the underlying mechanisms of violent behavior. Ultimately, the myth versus reality dynamic will likely persist, especially with the enduring appeal of true crime in media. Our role, as informed citizens, is to continue seeking education about the true capabilities and, importantly, the limitations of criminal profiling, ensuring our perceptions are grounded in evidence rather than exaggeration. In conclusion, the cooling-off period is a concept that has significantly shaped our understanding of serial homicide, helping us grasp the psychological space between horrific acts. It highlights how an offender might manage their dual existence, outwardly normal while inwardly consumed. However, it's also a concept far more nuanced, less precisely defined, and more debated than popular culture often portrays. Criminal profiling remains an evolving field, a blend of art and science, continuously striving for greater accuracy, empirical support, and practical utility. By understanding its complexities, we can better appreciate the intricate work involved in investigating these heinous crimes and avoid falling prey to overly simplistic or dramatized narratives. Thank you for joining me on Mind Matters today. I hope this discussion has offered you a clearer, more grounded perspective on this intriguing aspect of criminal psychology. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep engaging with the incredible complexities of the human mind.